It just might be the greatest sports franchise in the history of sports. A place where legends are made, and there's always something to talk about. Get ready to immerse yourself in pinstripes. Start spreading the news, hosted by Paul Semendinger and E.J. Fagan, a couple of doctors with a prescription for Yankee fever. And now, here's Dr. Paul Semendinger and Dr. E.J. Fagan. Get ready to start spreading the news.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Monday night. This is June the 23rd. My little grandbabies are now 1 year and 1 month old. It's crazy how time flies. Quick reminder here that this program is brought to you by Artemisia Publishing, a phenomenal publisher located in the United States of America, a traditional publisher. They do it all the right way, and they have great sports books, great baseball books, but they have books across every possible genre that I can think of, and many of those books are award winners. So go to apbooks.net and check them out. And ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our friend, my friend, your friend too, the great E.J. Fagan. E.J., how are you?
Paul, today's name that Yankee is Paul O'Neill.
Is it really?
Yes, I appreciate the humor there. That's good. Good job. Good job. Yes, network.
Oh my goodness. Well, EJ, the Yankees are down 4-1 here in the bottom of the sixth. A bunch of thoughts that I have around this team. We'll start with your podcast from last night, where last week I think we were both hoping that the Yankee little losing streak was just a blip, but then they didn't have a great week last week, though they did win the weekend series against the Orioles. How's your overall feeling on the team right now? Are you feeling like, here we go again, it's going to be a long summer, or is this just a couple of weeks of annoyance?
I think it's just a couple of weeks of annoyance, with a couple of caveats. So we had this long discussion on the podcast yesterday, and I think I can boil my thoughts down to kind of like two big things. Number one, two big reasons why, I think the Yankees are in better shape now than they were in the last 3 summers. So each of the last 3 summers, the Yankees have had a rough July and August, basically. I think 2023, that swoon starts in early June. The other years, it's July and August. And that's after really strong starts in each of those seasons, and including the 2022 season where they had like 120 win pace at one point. I mean, it was a really, really strong start, and then it all kind of went under. And I think it's fair to ask, is this just an Aaron Boone thing, a New York Yankees thing, that they have this kind of rough midsummer? I think there's a difference. I think the number one difference is that the personnel are just better than they were last year. I mean, if you look at some of the lineups the Yankees are putting out there during those poor Junes, I mean, you had Anthony Volpe leading off, not even like this year's version of Volpe, which is a little bit better. Still shouldn't be leading off, but a little bit better. But the bad version of Volpe leading off, a version of Volpe that was, an 80 OPS plus, right? Like just awful. And that wasn't because they were dumb. That was because they didn't have anybody. There was no one else to fit into those positions. You had, 3, 4, 5 guys in some of those lineups that just shouldn't be there. Some of them shouldn't have even been starters in the major leagues. And then you had Aaron Judge kind of in the middle of all of that. Sometimes you had one other good hitter. So Gleyber Torres was one of that good hitter at one point. Anthony Rizzo in 2022 was still pretty good. Like they had one or two other guys, but really it was Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, and a lot of below average production. And I just don't think that's this team, right? Like, you look at the lineups they're putting out there, and you have a supporting cast around Judge that is above average. You still, I believe, can field 9 Yankees with an OPS well above 700. Major league average is about 705, I think, right now. The AL average about 705, 710, something like that right now. And so, you can't put a lot of other stars around Judge at the moment. There's some guys who started off the season as stars and have kind of come back down to earth, but they've settled in as good players, not bad players. I think that's just a huge difference. And not only that, even if they were to suffer an injury, depending on the position, they have guys to replace those guys. So if you lose an outfielder, we've been talking about this forever. You have an extra outfielder. You lose a first baseman, you have an extra first baseman. You lose a DH, you have an extra DH. You lose someone in the infield, that's a little bit harder. Second, short, third. But even catcher, right? JC Ascari, I think, has been a really capable backup, and in theory, you have Ben Rice. You have a lot of guys who can fill those spots. I don't think we're going to be in a situation where you have a July 1st game where you look at the lineup and there's like 4 guys that shouldn't be in that lineup. And not just because it's a rest day, but because it's just a normal Tuesday. Number 2, this losing streak, it's been painful. They have been scoring runs. Hasn't been fun, but they have been pitching. And I think that the pitching staff is in about as good of a shape as you could want it to be right now. You have 3 starters right now who are among the best in the league: Clark Schmidt, Carlos Rodon, Max Fried. They show no signs of letting up. I don't see any evidence that any of those guys are suddenly going to kind of turn back into a pumpkin. You have the backer.
Will Warren's been better than everybody thinks. He had a couple of really bad games, and besides that, he's been solid.
He's been striking guys out, like, in really, really impressive strikeouts. So and he's your 4th or 5th starter. That last spot tonight, we can talk about it. I'm not crazy about the decision they've made, but I think they have some options. But like, that's a fifth rotation spot. Like, a lot of teams don't have good 5th rotation spots, and they don't have as good of a top 3 as the Yankees have. And so, like, I think that run differential is one of those stats we sometimes kind of refer to. We think about like a Pythagorean record, even though I hate that term. They didn't get massively outscored during this losing streak, even though their offense wasn't scoring very much. Because they pitched so well. They lost some 1-0 games, right? They had a game where they didn't allow a run until the extra innings. That's different than the previous teams, which also had pitching collapses at the same time. And so I think it all just kind of adds up to a team that's in a slump. Maybe isn't a 105 win team like they were playing like. Maybe they're really like that 93, 94 win team that we were kind of hoping they would be this year. That was kind of the high end of expectations this year. And so they're playing a little over their head. They had Grisham and Goldschmidt and Rice and all these guys probably putting up better batting lines than you would expect. And then they have some bad luck, right? Ben Rice, for instance, has had a lot of balls not falling in lately and has had some bad luck. They have some regression. And so, they have a bad week or two. And I think that's really what we're looking at. I'm not really all that concerned right now. It looks like we lost Paul. So I'm all here all by ourselves. Let me say why I am concerned. I think that I have a reason on top of my optimism that I think it is something we should be worried about with this team. Hey, Paul, I'm transitioning to talk about why I might be concerned about this team.
You want to hear something funny?
Sure.
I don't believe in machines having minds of their own and silly things like this, right? But years ago, and this hadn't happened for years, this computer would wonk out on us every now and again, and it would boot me off and just shut down in the middle of a thing. And I'm like, I used to ask, like, when I would have guests on the Dr. Sem show, if I'm doing an interview with you and it goes off the air, if I just become blank, are you good to just keep talking? And they'd be like, yeah, say, I'll be back in 2 minutes. But so anyway, that hasn't happened for years. Less than a week ago, I bought a brand new computer for the podcast, and I'm just getting it set up. And now, boom, this computer goes out. It's like it knows.
It's like it knows.
Yeah, like, all right, you want to improve. You think you're gonna?
Paul's computer is going out again. Okay. Well, Paul, you're buffering right now, and so I'm going to keep talking and let your internet connection recover.
Be concerned.
I think it's easy to look at this lineup and actually see that a bunch of guys who could end up being pretty bad hitters. That is, they're guys who had got off the hot starts and they're slumping. Paul Goldschmidt is batting terribly against right-handed hitters, not just like below average like he was in the beginning of the year, terribly, like well below 200 against right-handed hitters over the last month. He is at the point where he should be a strict platoon player, and his numbers are going to look really bad if he's in there with any frequency. Anthony Volpe has been in a deep slump, although his overall numbers are still good. So I'm still kind of hoping he can pull that out. You have DJ LeMahieu at third base, who I think has been started off looking kind of promising, and I think it's slowly resembling a very bad player. Jason Dominguez has leveled off a lot. He's still pretty bad against lefties, and he's kind of lost some of his really elite status against righties. And his defense hasn't really improved. Cody Bellinger has kind of settled into being a above average player, but not a great player like he was kind of when the Yankees were at their height this season. You kind of go down the list of guys and you go, wait a second, maybe, even though the season long numbers are pretty good, maybe the reality is they're putting out a team with a bunch of guys whose numbers are going to be worse or are going to look pretty bad by the end of the season. And you're going to look down and you're going to see 3-4 below average players. Some of those players like Stanton, who I think has been terrible since coming back, DJ LeMahieu, are on top of being, below average, like OPS hitters, are slow, bad base runners, repeating a lot of the sins of last year. But I also worry that they're just good enough that the Yankees don't do a lot at the trade deadline. There's some trades we're going to talk about. You have one trade proposal for me. I have a trade proposal for you. There are guys you could trade. And I think that I think the Yankees should have a little more urgency than I think they had a couple of weeks ago about improving this roster, because they do have weak points. I think that there a couple of weeks ago I was like, man, how do you improve this roster? Now I have some ideas. And
all right, so I'm gonna give you one right now. It's not even a trade. The Reds today DFA'd Jaime Candelario.
Mm-hmm.
Switch hitter. In 2020, his again, it was a shortened year, but his OPS plus was 137. In 2021, it was 121. 2022, he had a down year, it was only 81, but he bounced back in 2023. It was 121. Last year, he wasn't so good, 89. This year, he's played only 22 games, and he's been terrible. He's a natural third baseman. He can play first base. He's a switch hitter. He has some pop. He hit over 20 home runs twice, 19 once. What do you think?
I don't like it. I want some ceiling in my third base.
Mm-hmm.
If I think DJ LeMahieu is showing just enough that it's not an emergency. You don't have to go get the Reds DFA guy to fill the spot. I think Chisholm, by the way, his defense has really suffered at third base, if you look at the numbers. I'd love to move Chisholm back to second base. I think that should be a high priority.
I agree.
I think that Jaime Candelario, he is a player that if he's going to get full playing time, it should be on like the White Sox. Meaning that he needs to, I don't think the Yankees need to take that risk right now, like they did a couple of years ago, right? Like that's those bad teams where they say, oh crap, we have no one to play this position. Let's go out and get a not that great team's DFA guy. That's not the situation the Yankees are in right now. Like I think LeMahieu isn't great, but he's better than last year's LeMahieu, which was unplayable, well below replacement level. Now he's like a little bit above replacement level, but not much. So I don't like the Jaime Candelario. I think that if he were playing like the player that got him his contract, which was like average-ish hitter and good defender, I think sure. And I would trade for that player. But the player that just got DFA'd has been terrible. And I think that the Reds, they don't have that big of a budget. If they're going to just pay you not to play for you, that's saying something. I think he's just been very bad. And maybe he just wasn't that talented and he got overpaid and shouldn't have, the Reds probably shouldn't have signed him to that contract in the first place.
All right. So what's the trade you have for me? I'm eager
to
hear it.
I want to go get Eugenio Suarez, who is on the Diamondbacks. Now there's some problems with this. I was listening to a great, the Diamondbacks beat writer was on the Roundtable podcast, which is the Athletics baseball podcast. It's excellent. Strongly recommend it to everybody. And he was talking about the Reds and how the Reds management and ownership just doesn't want to rebuild, even though they're probably not going to make the playoffs. They don't want to sell big pieces.
You're
But
saying
Suarez,
the Reds. You mean the Diamondbacks?
I apologize, the Diamondbacks. Suarez, former Red. But Suarez is going to be a free agent at the end of the year. He's 33 years old, probably not coming back to Arizona. Is a really good hitter, has been a good defender in the past, and has not been a great defender this year. I think he's a big upgrade for the Yankees. He has 25 home runs this year. He has an 892 OPS this year. Statcast numbers are a little bit worse, so he's probably getting a little bit lucky, but still pretty strong overall numbers. He I think would excuse me. He would bat high in the Yankee order. He would play every day, and maybe you can get his defense back up a little bit. I think that Suarez is an easy upgrade for the Yankees. He is getting paid enough money that I don't think you're going to have to give up any. You're right now. If I look at the Diamondbacks, I say this is a team that just desperately needs pitching. They just need someone to fill some innings, and I don't think you're going to have to give up, say, Will Warren for Suarez, but I think you give up some guys you're not really going to miss all that much. For Suarez, and because as it's kind of a typical rental trade. Maybe if Luis Gil comes back, you can give up Warren, and you can maybe make some bigger trade around that. But I think he is an easy add for the Yankees. I think he fits the Yankees very well. He improves this team. He has a long history of being a solid bat, and since the second half of last year has been one of the best bats in the game.
All right, so what are you asking me?
I think that here's the thing. I think that the Yankees need a trade like this, and I don't, and I'd be disappointed if they all go out and get a Candelario type, or someone who's just not very good. This is a team that is still incomplete. Is kind of the lesson of the last week. It's not that it's a bad team. But the Rays are right on our heels. And I never really believed in the Toronto Blue Jays this season. And I still don't, but I do believe in the Rays. This is a really good Rays team. And they have been hot for a couple of months now. And that's probably, they're going to regress back down like a lot of players, especially their best hitter right now. I forget his name, is a first baseman. Really looks like a regression candidate. But it's still a good team, has a ton of pitching. It's a team that the Yankees are going to have to fight back against and try to win this division. In order to do that, you got to bring in some better players. One thing I'll also note, one thing we've been used to for a long time, the Yankees the AL East, the AL West, getting the bye rounds with the second wild card. And remember, the division winner who comes in third has to play in a wild card game. Now they play against the last wild card team. In theory, that's a much worse team, but still, you don't want to be in that 3-game situation at all. And that's because the AL Central has been really bad. So you win the AL Central with 85 wins or something. That is not the case this year. The Tigers have the best record in the American League, and they could still slump. They could come back to earth. They've been miraculously healthy, and that's not something that's gonna last forever. Like there's a world where the Tigers are the third best team in the American League. They're only 2 games in the loss column ahead of the Yankees. But I don't think it's a given that the Yankees could win the division and get the bye. I think there's a really good chance that they win the division and have to go in for the wild card. So you're not only trying to win the division, but you're competing against the Tigers, the Astros, I guess the Mariners a little bit, but not really the Tigers and the Astros for that bye. And it's going to come down to the wire. So you still need to improve this team to make that.
So let's just play the game then. Rodon, of course. Max Fried, of course, off the table. If they ask for Clark Schmidt.
For Suarez, no. And they won't, right? Like that's not what it's going to take to get a rental. If you look at what rentals get these days, it's really less than you would think. Will Warren is the interesting one where, I'm not sure how good he is. And I know that the Diamondbacks kind of just need some innings, and maybe there's some other players they can throw in with Suarez. And that's when I would start to consider. So for example, Zach Gallen is also a free agent. Zach Gallen's also been bad this year. He's been, I believe, has allowed more earned runs than any pitcher in the majors. And, I don't think, he might be traded, but I don't think he's very valuable. So I don't know if Gallen's a guy you go out and get. Like the D-backs, they're a good team. That's had a really bad pitching to start the year and had Corbin Burns go down with an injury, had Jordan Montgomery as a disaster, a contract. And I think the lesson there, I think that means that they have guys they can trade. So like Josh Naylor is a guy on their roster. I don't think the Yankees have a spot for him, but I could see them trading somebody like him. Merrill Kelly isn't interesting as kind of an older starter. Maybe you trade a younger starter for an older starter. Like there's guys in this team that I could imagine the Yankees trading for, but I don't think it's a Clark Schmidt level deal. I would struggle to find a player that is available on the trade market that I would trade Clark Schmidt for right now. He's been really good.
All right,
like,
so
Schmidt might be the second best pitcher on this team. I mean, and Rodon I think is playing well, but like Schmidt is looking incredible right now.
Now this I don't even think is a debate. I think I was even talking about this with my dad, who's going to be 87 and has been a baseball fan since 1946 and is a traditionalist in every sense of the word, loves the game, probably loves the game more than anybody, loves it more than I do. He's like, oh, what a good baseball game. Did you see the good? I said, I only watch the Yankees, Dad. Oh, but I love baseball. He's just totally.
Hey, when I'm retired, I'll watch baseball all day. That's great. That sounds like a great way to spend my 80s. Yeah.
Yes. So, and he's been doing that his whole life. Obviously worked and he was a school teacher for 30 some odd years and, he raised a family and all that kind of stuff. But he just loves baseball and he agreed, and I'm sure you do as well, that even though Clark Schmidt had a no-hitter the other night, you have to take him out afterwards.
Absolutely. Right. Like what, like that's a very selfish thing to keep Clark Schmidt in right there. And that, Schmidt is a guy who it wasn't like he was going into the ninth inning and he had thrown 100 pitches. Then sure, you keep him in. Like I understand, and you go batter to batter with him. He had pitched 7 innings. He was at his pitch count. There was no way he was getting through that no-hitter without more pitches than any Major League Baseball pitcher has thrown this year. And, and frankly, I mean, maybe Clark Schmidt wants the no-hitter, but like, think about the last couple of Yankee no-hitters. How much more do they mean to us now? Right? Like, does Domingo Germán's no-hitter, perfect game, feel
Corey
great
Kluber.
to you? Corey Kluber. Frankly, I can't even name who was before Corey Kluber. It had been a while, I think. It might have been Wells and Cohen, right? I mean, yeah. I just don't care. So like, I don't think it's a controversy. I don't think Schmidt's angry about it. I think Schmidt has just been elite. He has been one of the best starters in the major leagues. If you look at his last year, so he was injured. His last 30 starts, right? So he was injured at the second half of last year. He's now looking at something like an ERA like 2.9 in a lot of innings. He had that, again, the injury that kind of, killed his second half last year. But I think Schmidt has evolved into a not so small sample of being really, really good. He's not young anymore, right? He's 29. He's under team control for 2 more years after this. So he's just really a really valuable player to have. And, when you just look at your rotation, once Cole gets back, I mean, that could be a really good rotation. That's kind of fun to watch. And I now have confidence in Schmidt starting a playoff game, all those things. By the way, so in his last 28 starts, he's pitched 155 innings with a 2.85 ERA. 155 innings divided by 28 is 5.5 per start, which is pretty good for a major league pitcher.
So
and now he's going into the 7th and plus innings regularly. So just really good stuff from Schmidt. Really good. I mean, it's easy to forget this guy's a first-round pick.
And they drafted him, I believe, even though he was hurt, right? As I'm thinking back, he had rotator cuff surgery right away or something like that. I think so.
I forget what it wasn't. Tommy John right out of the draft, but I forget. But he was this is a really talented pitcher, and he had a rough start with the Yankees. He had a couple of really weird injured seasons. He made the majors with really not that much experience in the minors, and had a rough couple of years, had trouble getting lefties out, and just kind of slowly figured stuff out. And Now he's 29 years old. He knows what he's doing out there, and I'm just kind of I'm really really happy to see Schmidt. He's one of those players I'd love to give a contract extension to. I don't know what it would cost. You could I'm sure get a little bit of a discount because he's a distance away from free agency. He's a pitcher. He's 29. But I'd love to say, like, Schmidt, here's 3 years on top of that, right? Let's employ you for a while. No idea if that's a thing that the Yankees would consider. They really don't do a lot of contract extensions. But I just have a lot of confidence in the guy right now. He looks like a starter, looks like a pitcher.
Yeah, and he's been terrific. Would you have sat Volpe? He was 0 for 24, something like that.
Yeah, I don't understand this controversy at all, frankly. Like, look, he was 0 for 24. He had a good game. He came out of it, had 3 hits, had the nice home run. Frankly, it doesn't feel like he's fixed. It doesn't look like he's fixed today. He struck out a couple of times today, had a couple of ugly swings that I'm seeing. I look, Volpe is prone to these big, long slumps. But we've also seen situations where he's given a day or two of rest.
And then he comes back stronger.
Look, I get that he's young, but it's hard to play shortstop. He's a small guy. Maybe it's a little physically taxing to play out there. And, when you're going over 24, you're not helping the team. It doesn't hurt to put you in a slump. Oswald Peraza had some good defensive plays. I think that Volpe's overall had a good season, and I want him to get back on track. And if that means resting him, or by the way, resting Austin Wells for a little bit, similar kind of situation, I think it's an easy call. It's not a benching. It's not a benching, right? Like I think that's he wasn't benched, right? This was a planned rest. They have, by the way, a long stretch of games they're in the middle of right now. I think it's something underrated. Like, for example, like Alan Winans is pitching tonight. We can talk about that, but like part of the reason why he's pitching tonight is he couldn't put a bullpen game together in the middle of this long stretch of games. And so like I think you just gotta accept reality that maybe Volpe is going to play 155 games a year if he doesn't go on the IL. That's not that bad.
Correct. Now, I am against the idea, in principle, if nothing else, of saying. I remember a couple years ago, to frame it better, Joey Gallo was struggling, and he then had a game, and he had a pretty good game, and it might have been 2 good games in a row, and then they sat him. And they asked Aaron Boone, why'd you sit him? And he's like, well, we decided 2 weeks ago that he'd have Sunday off. Now, like, I think that's thinking a little too far ahead. Like, sometimes you have to go with the hot hand. I didn't think Volpe was necessarily overly great. One of those hits was a bloop. One of those
home run was a pretty weak home run.
Yeah, like a little dinker down the third base line or something. It wasn't like he was driving the ball. So I don't have a problem sitting a guy when they need to rest. Somebody said something like, he's a young guy. Why does he need a rest? Well, he can't be tired. Well, why?
I mean, look, middle infielders wear down.
Tired when you were 24?
Well,
weren't you tired when you were 18?
Middle infielders wear down. Like we give catchers scheduled rest days, and I personally think that giving a shortstop a scheduled rest day, especially with a guy like Volpe who's kind of prone to these long slumps, is not a bad idea. I don't see the problem. It's not like he's resting. It's not like they're doing this, every week, every day game after a night game or anything like that, right? They're, you give the guy's going to take 4 or 5 extra days off and sit on the bench, and I don't think that's a problem at all.
Now, there was a lot of talk about getting IKF, but his numbers really haven't.
Pretty awful right now.
Yeah.
Look, IKF is 30. And I think that he's starting to look like a not that great major league player anymore. I don't think he's an upgrade at third base, or much of an upgrade at least. I don't know.
Plus, at least the other day was only 88.
I would be upset if their only significant position player trade at the deadline was IKF. Because that is like, look, if you tell me he's going to be the last guy on your bench, maybe you can find a use for him, right? He's got a lot of flexibility. Maybe he allows you to send down Dominguez because he could also play outfield, so you have an extra outfielder. Maybe he's your guy who pinch hits in certain situations, bunts. Like a player like that can be useful.
But not to be your new starter.
Not to be my new starter. No.
I agree. So right now, EJ, the Yankees are down 4-1. It's the top of the 8th.
Giancarlo Stanton at the plate. We got 2 men on. Let's do this. This is the playoffs all over again. Come on. Maybe playoff Stanton can show up.
a couple of times in this game. They had runners on first and third and one out, couldn't score them. They had runners on first and second and one out, couldn't score a run. They had a leadoff double by Bellinger, couldn't score them.
Yeah, look, I'll say they've had guys on base, unlike some of those like really bad games they weren't scoring. So like to me, that's a good thing. But I guess a lot of those guys on base are Cody Bellinger and Aaron Judge, and not a lot of guys kind of around them. Look, I think that we can talk about the lineup not pitching, not hitting well. Paul Goldschmidt kind of losing his magic against lefties, all that kind of stuff. I think when they decided to start Alan Winans, that was a bad sign for this game. Now, there's a caveat I'll say there is that they may not have had much of a choice, right? Ryan Yarbrough goes down during his bullpen a couple of days ago. And if you're going to call up somebody else from the minors, like it may not be their day. Like they may not be available to start tonight.
Correct. And so Winans was available, right?
He had a 0.9 ERA.
Yeah.
He also throws 89. Like I think there's a world where you have to kind of give the Alan Winans of the world a chance. You have to reward your guys who are hoping to make the major league team. And when you have a 0.9 ERA, maybe you get a chance to get called up. I don't think he should get another start. He was not good tonight. He was not fooling the Reds hitters tonight. He was nibbling around the plate as you would expect of a guy who has stuff that's good at AAA and not good in the majors. And I think that's Alan Winans. I think that Cam Schlittler should get this start. We talk about this on the next start. Schlittler was the Yankees' top pitching prospect basically entering the season. Had a big breakout year last year. 6'6", big college guy, big fastball, big curveball, and has just gotten better at everything basically this year. Last year he ended at AA, had really good strikeout numbers, not great control. He's gotten the control under control. He has an ERA under 2.5 at both AA and AAA this year. Has, I think, 3 starts at AAA, so just got promoted. Ideally, give him another month or so before you call him up. But this is a guy who I think like has major league stuff, has the potential to be a really good starter. You look at him, and you just see like, yeah, the guy looks like a major league starter. Like he's a big, strong guy who throws 97, right? Like there you go. And he has, a history of being durable. So he pitched 120 innings in the minors last year. That's pretty good. He's been durable this year. There's not a good reason not to call him up. This is not a guy who isn't ready. It's not a guy who came out of nowhere and has put up good numbers. Like this is a guy that everybody identified as a potential major league starter, has had an excellent season, is in AAA, and is probably a future starter on this team. And what I fear is that they're going to call up Marcus Stroman instead. Another guy who throws 89, nibbles. Your best case scenario is he turns into the bad version of Ryan Yarbrough. I don't want that. Like I don't want a low ceiling guy. Like you can give Stroman the spot if your best option Schlittler isn't good. Look, you gotta have the guy to the 40-man roster. I don't really care. You gotta use an option year, give him service time. I don't really care. Like, look, if he's good, he's on the team for a while, and he's a great. You add him to Schmidt and Warren and this great rotation, right? If he's bad, you option him down. Like, there's no downside. I guess the only downside is you can't trade him if he's bad, or rather, it's harder. His trade value goes down. And look, if they're really like circling another really strong, like a Juan Soto trade or something, not something similar to that, like sure, but I don't think they are. I don't think you give up Schlittler except for a really excellent prospect, a really excellent major league hitter, and you have other guys that you can include in that trade instead. I think it's an easy, and you could always trade Will Warren if you end up having an extra starter, right? Like I think calling up Schlittler for the next start is easy. He was not available for tonight. He had started just a couple of days ago, and so I'll be watching to see if he makes his next minor league start. If they send down Winans after this game, which I think they will, and what they say about Stroman. I think the unfortunate problem is that the default is probably calling up Stroman. He's at 3 minor league rehab starts. He's basically ready to come up, and I think they're just kind of delaying it. They can't keep him on the IL with a fake knee injury forever. And I think he probably wants to play. He's now saying the right things. He's saying, hey, I'll play wherever it is to help the team. I think after Rafael Devers, I think team players are going to say that a lot. But I'm sure he wants to start. He's stretched out as a starter. but I would be very disappointed if that's the case. I think Schlitterler is the best option. You also could bring up send in Brubaker, which I think is not a terrible option either. JT Brubaker just came back. He pitched out of relief a couple nights ago, but is stretched out as a starter. I think those are the two guys I want to see. I want to see ceiling. I don't want to see throws 89 and nibbles.
And we know what Marcus Stroman is. We've lived it. We've seen him on the Yankees. We've seen him on the Cubs. We've seen him on the Mets. We've seen him on the Blue Jays.
Well, we've seen him be really good, but he's not.
But he's not that 30, guy. When he was good, that was years ago.
Yeah, he's 34. He's lost 3 miles an hour in his fastball, and he's 5'7". Like, he doesn't have that much room to lose physical ability and still be an effective major league starter. Ryan Yarbrough is the exception, the guy who can throw 89 and be good. He's also, he's got a weird delivery, right? He's a side armor. Marcus Stroman's not a side armor. He's just short, right? And has gotten by with really impressive pitching for a long time. But I don't think Marcus Stroman, I don't think a contender, if you DFA'd him tomorrow, I don't think a contender's picking him up. Maybe he can get a major league job somewhere, but I think there's a pretty good chance that Marcus Stroman's going to come back. He's going to throw 3 starts and have an ERA. It's already over 11, but he's going to allow 10 runs in those 3 starts. And that would be he could be worse than that. He could be worse than 10 runs in 3 starts because, that could just be who he is right now. He could just be very hittable. You're just giving those games away.
Now he's signed for $18 million, right?
Something like that. Yeah.
All right. Let's just say it's $18 million. And we're 3 weeks away or 2 weeks away from the All-Star game, or 3 weeks, I guess. And so that's technically half the season. So if you DFA Marcus Stroman, you're throwing away $9 million, correct? That's all that's left.
Yep. And he's not going to make his player option, so you're not worrying about that at this point.
Correct. So, at some point, you're the New York Yankees. And
it's a sunk cost. No one's taking that money from you at this point. Maybe during the offseason, you could have convinced somebody to make a trade with you. That's not happening. Marcus Stroman is a dead asset.
Correct. And so why would you, just because you owe him money, put him out there in games that you need to
agree.
win?
I agree. I get that he's a respected veteran and all of that, but if you didn't have a better option, I'd say try it out. Right, the Yankees had an injury at third base, who's a better player than DJ LeMahieu right now, Oswaldo Cabrera, and they didn't have any other options. And so I said, okay, well, I guess you put LeMahieu out there, right? If the Yankees had the injury to Yarbrough and they didn't have anybody to call up, then that makes sense. But they had JT Brubaker, they have Cam Schlitterler. Frankly, they have Alan Winans, who's just a younger version of what Stroman is doing, and I don't have a lot of faith in that. I think that those are all much better options than calling up Marcus Stroman. And so you don't make the loser bet, right? Who's the best player to help you win that game? I think the answer is Schlitterler. I also think that there's long-term advantages to Schlitterler. And it's 5-1. Tim Hill just gave up a home run to Ellie De La Cruz.
So in the top of the inning, Bellinger double, walk to Judge. I don't know if it was intentional or not because we're talking here and I'm just doing it on Gamecast. And then Giancarlo Stanton, right off the injured list only about a week ago, put right in the middle of the lineup, playing every day. What does he do? He strikes out.
I think it's insane that he's batting fourth. Giancarlo Stanton has been bad. Look at the StatCast page. It is worse than you think it is. Right now, Giancarlo Stanton has an xWOBA of 251. He has awful contact numbers. He hit the ball. He's hit the ball hard. He's got high bat speed, and everything else on that StatCast page is awful. And frankly, that is what we should expect. Giancarlo Stanton, except for 3 weeks in the playoffs last year, has looked like an X player, right? A player who should not be in the majors anymore. Even if he is an average hitter, remember he's a terrible base runner and doesn't play defense. And so you're giving Giancarlo Stanton at bats that you could give to Ben Rice, to Jason Dominguez, to Cody Bellinger. I do not understand why he is not only back in the lineup every day. That I get. You give the guy a little bit of time to prove that he's good. It's only been a week of games, and so give him a little bit more time if you want to play out the small sample. But batting fourth, That's insane. That is purely a name recognition batting fourth, right? That is, I've heard this guy's name. He was good in the 90s. Let's play him, right? And like, that is a loser move. And it annoys me to no end. Like, I get it. He's a respected guy. I like Giancarlo Stanton as a player. I would have loved the good version. I would have loved the bad version, the post-trade Yankees version of Giancarlo Stanton batting fourth. That's not who this player is. And the playoffs thing is some kind of weird magic. Like, I'm not going to say it's not real because he's done it a bunch, but it's not replicable, right? I mean, even if you believe that Giancarlo Stanton in the playoffs is magic, it's not the playoffs.
Right. It's June.
Right. So it's not what do you think he like figured something out, on September 1st, on October 1st of last year, and he's going to carry that into the season. That's clearly not what's happening so far. At least so far, we have no evidence of that. So I will be annoyed if you continue to like, I'd rather put a Volpe cleanup than Stan, right? Like to me, like it makes no sense to roll this lineup. By the way, Judge and Stanton are both righties hitting back to back. Now I get that there's a lefty on the mound. So maybe that changes that calculus just a little bit, but Volpe's been pretty good against lefties. And that's going to screw up your bullpen later. You against the other team's bullpen later in the game. The Yankees generally have been lefty righty this season because they have the personnel to do that. I think it's purely
old habits because they just. You know the old saying, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, or fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on whatever it is, like.
Right. No, I agree. Yeah.
You see the same thing year after year after year after year. When Judge
let me
bad, I can get them out because they Judge is a different animal, but years ago,
I think there's a difference. I think that the difference is that in past years, you sometimes had guys batting in places that you don't want them batting because the roster was bad.
Because you didn't have other guys.
Right. You got guys now. You got the guys.
The same hitter.
Yeah. It is deeply strange to me that now, by the way, it's not just Aaron Boone, right? Like I listen to the broadcast and I hear people talk about Giancarlo Stanton, Hall of Famer, Giancarlo Stanton as another 4 MVPs at the top of the lineup, which is actually kind of a cool thing. But which is kind of fun. It's kind of fun. It doesn't mean anything.
No, it does
not. Like you have 4 MVPs. One of them is 37 and can't hit righties. He's batting first against a lefty tonight. So that's I think was a good decision, even if he went over 4. Cody Bellinger, who is not the player that won that MVP, even though he's been good this season. Aaron Judge, best player of all time. And Giancarlo Stanton, who won an MVP in 2017, has not been the same player since.
You could have Ty Cobb, Jackie Robinson, Roy Campanella, and Yogi Berra at the top of the lineup. There's a bunch
Roger Clemens could pitch, right? Like,
doesn't mean
the reality.
It's fun. It's fun to say it, but it doesn't mean anything.
There's have you seen Welcome to Wrexham, the show about the soccer team that Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney bought?
You've talked about it, but I've never seen it.
Love it. Great sports show. The thing about there's something really interesting going on with the documentary right now. So it's a sports documentary, and then they do some of the puff piece kind of stuff that I never care. I don't care about the human interest stories. I want to know about the players, the sports. They keep getting promoted. That is, they keep being really good, being the best team in the league, and so they get to go up a league. That's how the English soccer system works. And so you have all these players that were a really important part of the show when it started. There were characters on the show, and there were soccer players on the team playing really well. And as they've faced tougher and tougher competition, they are no longer up to par. They've gotten older, they've gotten injured, and they're just not as good, right? Like there's one player named Ollie Palmer, and he was one of their top 3 or 4 players in the first couple of seasons of the show when they were a couple more leagues down. And now he's not playing. He's not even on the active roster because he's just not good enough. He's a little older. And that's the reality of sports. And what I love about the documentary is that they're not pretending that this is a character they're going to have on their documentary forever. They're basically, singing his funeral, and they're singing that with some of their other top players on the team. And then they're bringing in new players, new characters. That's how sports works, right? The best players 3 years ago are not necessarily the best players this year. And I hate that these reputations are so sticky. Like I can look at the numbers as much as you guys can. It's not rocket science. I'm not a genius. I don't need a doctorate to make these arguments.
But you have one.
Sure,
Michael,
but like
no,
it's not. This isn't that complicated. I knew this shit. I did stuff before my doctorate. Yeah.
And Paul O'Neill in the beginning of the game were saying how impressed they were with how Giancarlo Stanton's been swinging the bat since he's come back. He came.
It's just a lie. It's just a
Aaron
lie.
Like, he came back game ready. Like
he's not. But yes, he's hit a bunch of ground balls. He doesn't have a hit. I think he has one hit out of the infield. He had double last night. That was out of the infield.
And one RBI.
And here's the thing. He doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt. That's the important part here, right? He is an aging player who has gotten worse year after year after year, as you would expect, and would not have a starting role if he weren't being paid too much money. And the thing I just wish that major league teams would understand is that there are some costs, and you're paying that salary no matter what. Nobody's going to take Giancarlo Stanton's salary unless it's in a weird salary dump situation where effectively, you're still paying him. You're just swapping bad contracts. And I don't think that if he were a free agent today, that the Dodgers would pick him up. The Rays would pick him up. They'd pick any good, smart team, the Brewers, the Cubs, whatever, right? None of these teams would play him because he's not any good anymore. I'm not even sure he's a major league player at this point. The playoff Stanton is, there's that last little bit of hope. And he really was incredible in the playoffs. That was fun. Maybe he was just lucky, right? Like, can we just accept that maybe playoff Stanton is magic, is luck, is not real? He has an approach at the plate that no other player in baseball has, and maybe that's for good reason. And maybe he was able to fake it for a while with his weird, closed stance and basically guess swing and miss kind of stuff. And as he's gotten older, he can't do it anymore. It's just not, the weaknesses have been exposed. His athleticism is even worse than it was last year. So we're still waiting on more data to really clock his sprint speed. But right now he's at 23.8 feet per second, which is, I believe, even worse than last year when he was one of the worst base runners in the league. So last year was 24.6. He's at 23.8 right now. Just completely immobile. Now we'll get more, he hasn't run that much. So we don't have, that number needs a lot of observations to kind of stabilize. For example, Anthony Volpe was really slow for the first month of the season, according to that number. And then he's gotten back to his normal numbers. But like, I really hope that him and DJ LeMahieu have a short leash. Now they don't have options for LeMahieu. Like basically, if you didn't play LeMahieu, there's no one else to play. Oswald Peraza has been bad as well. So I get the
Yorbit Vivas would have to call him up, and they got rid of Pablo Reyes, rightfully so, but
not good players, right? They have options at DH. They have options at cleanup hitter. You don't have to play Stanton there. He does not deserve the benefit of the doubt. Now again, it's only been a week. I'm willing to give him a little bit more time, but I think like All-Star break, if his numbers are not significantly better, I think you DFA him at this point, right? Like that's what I would do. Whether or not they can stomach eating that much money, but honestly, like we're at the point where there's not that, like you can see the light at the end of the tunnel with the Giancarlo Stanton contract. He's getting to the point where the Marlins are paying a pretty good portion of his salary. I believe his overall salary is going down. So the actual amount of money that they have left is like still going to hurt. Like I would not like Giancarlo Stanton is going to be cashing some checks. But it's not to the point where like you play him in hopes of recovering a little bit of that money. The odds of recovering that money are going down every day, and the opportunity cost or the potential gains of getting some of that money back are lower every day. So he has
wins, right?
Yeah. So it costs you money.
He's costing younger players service time, experience.
Yeah, I mean, and win. I mean, like those younger players are good players.
It's now 6-1.
Oh, there you go. I mean, look, Giancarlo Stanton has 2 more years under contract. He's got $29 million next year, $25 million the year after that, and then an option in 28 that the Yankees obviously are going to decline. The Marlins are paying a decent amount of that money. And so, now you're starting to talk about not, eating $60 million or something. I think there's a world where that happens. And I think that the Yankees maybe owe it to Giancarlo Stanton after his playoffs to prove that he's a better player. But he's not doing that right now. Like, I get he's had some singles. Like, Giancarlo Stanton's not a singles hitter, right? He's not a guy who hits, like, he's not valuable if he, has an empty batting average, right? Like, that's not what we're talking about here. Like, he's got to hit some home runs and he's got to get on base. And that's just not the player that we're seeing.
Yeah, when he gets a single, you've got the slowest runner in
right.
the game clogging the base paths. How does that help?
So I haven't looked at the leaderboard yet this year for team base running. Last year, the Yankees were the worst base running team in the majors by a lot. And it wasn't just the old guys. It was guys like Gleyber Torres who were really bad. And basically everybody but Judge, I believe, and Judge and Volpe were just bad base runners last year, if I remember correctly. They lost a lot, like a couple of wins on base running alone. And so if I go look at base running run value, and I look at, let's first off look at individual players, the worst players in the league. Aaron Judge is actually -3. Now, he's been on base a lot, so part of that is that he's not base running. He's probably not running that much. And frankly, I'm okay with that. So Aaron Judge, you get a pass. They have nobody else in the bottom 50, bottom 60, bottom 70.
Wow.
Their next worst base runner is Austin Wells, who's an average base runner.
Oh, that's a great thing.
Now, they don't have a lot of great base runners on the team either. Jason Dominguez is their best, who's a +2 runs. He's like top 40 or something. So they're not great base running, but they are above average at base running. But LeMahieu doesn't have a lot of time. Giancarlo Stanton doesn't have a lot of time. Like, that can get worse.
Mm-hmm.
And it really does concern me. Now, if I look at I'm going to try to get to the team. There we go. The team standings right now. And we look at the team standings. I'll actually give you the overall number. The Yankees are the average, basically. They're 1 run below average, but they're an average overall base running team. That makes sense, kind of given those players. Maybe there's some players who aren't qualified, who maybe are below average, kind of bringing some of those numbers down. That's a huge improvement over last year, right? I think I wrote a blog post about a year ago saying, like,
you did.
But like, or during the offseason, being like, look, all they got to do is be average, and you can improve this team, and they did that. I worry that they're gonna regress back down, and you're gonna look at games, and it's like you're gonna have like 5 old guys in the lineup. You're gonna have Goldschmidt, Judge, who's kind of old, even though he's Aaron Judge, so I'm okay with that. DJ LeMahieu, Giancarlo Stanton, all in the same lineup. That's starting to look like last year a little bit. So I'm. I had more fun watching this team when it was Oswaldo. Hopefully you get well soon. Ben Rice, Austin Wells, like young guys, Anthony Volpe, maybe, Jason Dominguez, maybe not guys who are playing at the top of their game, but are playing well enough that, they can help support the core of the team, which is Aaron Judge, the pitching staff, Cody Bellinger, these very good players who I think matter a lot. But I'll be really disappointed if we're going into the playoffs and it's like a bunch of 35-year-olds. That's not a winning team.
No, and again, it's like you're flipping the channels or whatever, and you see a movie that you've watched a bunch of times that's just not that good.
Yeah.
And at the exact same time, you look at a different channel, which is the younger guys, and it has these up and coming actors or whatever, and it's getting, it
is much more on top of being a better team. It's a more entertaining product. You're right.
Correct.
And I really am enjoying watching these guys develop. And look, if Jason Dominguez takes a year or two to become a really good major league player, that's okay, because he's playable. This is not 2023. When late in the season they called up Peraza and Pereira and Cabrera, and they had Volpe up, and they had Wells up, and they had a bunch of guys, and they all were terrible. That's a very different situation. That was hard to watch because you were watching kind of the future wilt before your eyes. Some of those players, Volpe, Cabrera, Wells, have gotten better. The bad ones are not playing as much anymore. Pereira's still down in the minors, still kind of doing his thing. And they finally accumulate a young core of players that they haven't had basically since the 90s. They've had one or two young guys come up.
Sitting those guys.
Yep. Well, I'll be honest. They have been better than I expected at not sitting. The only guys they've been sitting has been like Actually, I don't think they're sitting Bellinger a little bit. Looking at the depth chart here, so like they've been better even with since Stan's coming back, and they think that Ben Rice situation is he can play catcher, but he's also been playing a little bit of first base. Like I want him to play more. He's not playing against lefties, which I think is a mistake because I think he can hit lefties. He sat on Friday against a righty, but like they are like they have basically pushed Goldschmidt into like a soft platoon, which has solved some of these problems. But Stan's also played, 4 of the last 6 games at DH. That is really that those at bats are going somewhere. But I've been impressed that they have managed to. They have not just turned one of these guys into a bench player, which is good. And they have sacrificed some veteran at bats in order to make that happen.
It's still more and more looking like the same old story. EJ, we're at the top of the hour. I have to do the game summary. It's the 9th inning. They're down 6-1. I have to get the quick hit up, so I think we'll wrap it up. Now, we'll try to pre-record next week. You're going to be on vacation for the next couple of weeks, but if not,
got my line shirt ready to go. I'm going to Cape Cod.
Yeah, you look great. If not, have a great vacation, but we'll try to make this thing work. We'll figure it out.
Cool.
Have a great night, everybody. Thank you for watching. This has been the Start Spreading the News Yankee podcast. Have a great night.